Then I am glad to moderate and to introduce the honorable speakers honorable speakers that we have a really interesting a group of speakers today to approach the main question of this session is the territorial response to growing inequalities in the current crisis context, and the majority of the presentation of the speakers will approach this thematic session through the presentation of different indicators that they are using in the daily work to tackle the problem of monitoring sustainable development of different dimensions of sustainable development. Then I remind you that there is interpretation. You can access to Spanish, French, and English interpretation. And the dynamic of the session will be 9 minutes presentation for each speaker. And then we will open a first group of questions and answers after the 3 preliminary first speakers, and then a second round of speakers, and again a session of questions and answers of 10 minutes each. Then I now will have the pleasure to introduce the different speakers. Heriberto Tapia, policy specialist in the UNDP Human Development Report Office. Michael Green, Chief Executive Officer of the Social Progress Imperative. Praya Sood, Coordinator of the Global Alliance for Reporting Progress and Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies. Carlos Cesa, Research Director of the Institute of Studies for the Integration of Systems of Rome and Project Coordinator of the ESPON Territorial Quality of Life Measurement Methodology Project. Then Claire Medina, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Malawi. And Mario Biggeri, Associate Professor, Development Economist of the University of Florence. It is a pleasure for me to have this possibility to discuss and to hear your presentations. Let me introduce now very briefly myself. I am the Head of Research of United Cities and Local Governments, the global organization of local authorities that we have a representation in 140 countries. We are one of the main global organizations of local authorities. Particularly, I was involved in the reporting process to the HLPF, monitoring the localization of the SDGs at territorial levels worldwide. We presented every year a report that's called Toward the Localization of the SDGs to the HLPF. And since 2-3 years, we are promoting the development of voluntary local reviews, and from last year on, voluntary subnational reviews. I can explain later what that means. And we are partnering with UN Habitat to publish a regular series on voluntary local reviews. Then, this session will focus on the multidimensional dimension to measure human development and its impact on the planet, quality of life, social progress, poverty, and related governance issues. Some of the presentations look at the country at global levels. Others adopt a more place-based or territorial approach. All of them wonder about how to develop a more comprehensive understanding to measure human development and well-being, to complement the traditional measure of development progress based on the GDPs, poverty indicators, on how to revise the human development indicator to integrate new dimensions in the framework of the analysis of the current planetary challenges and the achievement of the SDGs. Almost all integrate ecological dimension. The focus on poverty measure are more focused on basic human needs, income, and local capabilities. The other approach looks for social progress and quality of life, refers to the concept of well-being and enhanced life opportunities. Then we will begin this debate with the presentation of Heriberto Tapia, that is working, as I mentioned, based on the experience of the Human Development Indicator and the increasing pressure of our societies on the planet. Then I will give the floor to Michael Green, of the Social Progress Imperative, that is a non-profit organization that will develop the approach on social progress indicators. And then the last presentation of this first round will be Priya Sood, that will present the Global Alliance for Reporting Progress and Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies, how to coordinate the reporting process toward monitoring the SDG 16. Then, Heriberto, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Edgardo, for the invitation. So I'm going to try to respond the question from the point of view of the production of the last Human Development Report that was launched on December last year. I have some slides. Maybe if I am allowed to share, that would be great. But first, let me start saying that in order to answer this question, we need to understand that the world is under very important pressures. We see the changes that are happening. We see it through COVID. So how a shock in one dimension, in this case, health, has been affecting all the components of human development, not only in health, but also in the economy, also in education, and even in terms of gender inequality. So these shocks are expected to be more and more present as part of our lives, and therefore we need to be able to integrate them in the way we think about policies, in the way we think about human development, and also in the way we think about the measurement of human development. So these shocks are multidimensional, and also they are unequally distributed. So we have been talking about the Anthropocene as the current moment. It's a new geological epoch that some scientists think is starting around this time. Just to give you a context, the Anthropocene is supposed to replace the Holocene, which started around 2,000 years ago. So this is a very important defining moment, and therefore we need to adapt our tools. So just to give you an idea about the challenges, these are projections about the number of additional days of extreme temperatures by the end of the century. We have classified countries in 4 groups: low, medium, high, and very high human development. And what this figure shows is that by the end of the century, countries with low human development will have 100 additional days of extreme temperatures. That's huge. And on the other hand, countries that are more developed probably will have a reduction in the days of extreme temperatures because of global warming will reduce the number of extreme cold days that they already have. This is the case of no mitigation. If there is mitigation, there would be a change. The number of additional extreme temperatures days would be half, 50, instead of 100. However, what is important to have in mind here is that still there would be a very significant effect. And second, the effect will be unequally distributed. This is something that we need to take into account. Now, what is the nature of the problem now? The nature of the problem is that as part of the way we have been developing, we have been creating pressures of the planet. This figure shows how the Human Development Index in the horizontal axis is positively related with the pressures on the planet, which is measured in the vertical axis as material footprint per capita. So we have countries in the lower left quadrant with low human development and lower pressures on the planet, and we have countries with very high human development, but high pressures on the planet in this other quadrant at the top right. What we don't have is countries here in this empty box that are achieving both high human development and low pressures on the planet. So the fact that there is no country there means that we need to redefine the policies, but only is telling us that the Human Development Index is not enough to guide policies. We need something different. So what we are emphasizing in our report is that we need to look at things in a systemic way. We are all part of the same system, humans, and also what is happening in the planet. And therefore, the inequalities that we generate as part of social imbalances are creating vicious cycles, inducing pressures on the planet. If the ones that are generating the cost of the planet are benefit from them and they are not absorbing the cost, that generates incentive to produce more pressures. More pressures produce more risk in terms of climate change, and more climate change induces shocks, which in turn affect some communities more than others. So in order to address this problem, we are proposing an approach that combines equity on the one hand, because innovation is, equity because we need to be able to align properly the incentives and empower people, in particular those that now are more vulnerable. Second, innovation, because we need to find something new. And third, stewardship of nature, because it is essential to give, some people say, agency to nature, to value, to move towards a system in which nature has an intrinsic value and is not only an anthropocentric view. So our report promotes three types of policies. First, social norms. Second, incentive and regulation. And third, nature-based solution. I mentioned this because our measurements are intended to provide incentives to move towards a new generation of policies that we have identified in these three areas. Just to give you an example, and this is important from the point of view of the territorial statistics, some of the changes are happening at a very localized level. In the figure at the left, you see the relative contribution first of different income groups. And here we have and these contributions are in terms of the marginal emissions that on average certain groups contribute to the planet. And you see that indigenous people, the contribution of indigenous people on average in the Amazons is equivalent to the damage that is done by the top 1% of the income distribution. So it's really important to look at what is happening with different groups. So this is the contribution of indigenous people, but what's happening with the conditions faced by indigenous people and those who are trying to protect the planet. And we see here to the right, a very concerning trend in which the killings of environmental activists has been increasing. So now just let me go very quickly, revise what we are proposing in order to incentivize change. So if the Human Development Index is not enough, so then what? We are proposing an experimental index. We are calling it the Planet Adjusted Human Development Index, which combines, on the one hand, the Human Development Index, and on the other hand, an index of planetary pressures. This index is formed by two variables. On the one hand, material footprint per capita, and second, CO2 emissions per capita. In this figure, you see how the two indices are combined. In the horizontal axis, the Human Development Index, in the vertical axis, the Planetary Adjusted Human Development Index. This index tends to adjust more the countries that are contributing more to the planetary pressures, which are the more developed countries, and this is why the difference is greater in this zone. Also, to give you an idea how this is evolving, let me show you this figure that combines in the horizontal axis the Human Development Index, and in the vertical axis the index of planetary pressure. So as I showed before, there is no country that is in this suite exposed to the bottom right. This is where we want to be, with high Human Development Index and low planetary pressure. This is actually what we need in order to be able to sustain our human development. However, countries as developed have tended to move towards the right, but also upward. So the challenge is to be able to change this trend, and hopefully with this measurement, we will be giving the incentives, the signal to every single country that human development means both take care of the people, but also of the planet. So I'm going to stop here. Happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roberto, for your contribution. As I propose, we will ask all the participants that want to ask any question to send it by chat. We will try to collect all the questions and come back at the end of the three first presentation to open a debate and give also the floor for the participants if they want. So then now I would like to give the floor to the second speaker, Michael Green. I remind he is the Chief Executive Officer of the Social Progress Imperative and working on the Social Progress Indicator. Please, Michael, go on.
Ricardo, thank you very much, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you. So the Social Progress Imperative, which creates the Social Progress Index, was created about 10 years ago by a group of social entrepreneurs supported by various business leaders and academics, to really find a way of putting people at the center of the debate about the development of our societies. We did this really thinking about how can we create a practical, useful tool to help better decision-making. And in a way, what we were thinking about was, how can we create something that actually would get action into decision-making? So let me show you how the Social Progress Index works. What we did was we developed a framework that asked, what are the qualities of a good society? Which essentially is three things. A good society is one that gives everyone the basic needs of survival, essentially food, water, shelter, safety. Secondly, a good society is one that gives everyone the foundations of well-being: access to basic knowledge, access to information, health and wellness, and environmental quality. And thirdly, a good society is one that gives everyone opportunity in terms of rights, freedom of choice, inclusiveness, and access to advanced education. Now, you might be asking, why on earth did you do this when we had the Human Development Index? And I have to say, I love the Human Development Index. I respect the memory of Mahbub al-Haq enormously, and Roberto and his colleagues do fantastic work. But the gap we were trying to fill was creating a framework that had a greater richness of indicators, because HDI, one of its great qualities is it works off a limited number of indicators. But we wanted to bring in these wider factors that included a richer measure of quality of life, a richer measure including things like rights and freedoms, etc. We also wanted a measure that was independent of economic indicators, because of course, gross national income per capita is part of HDI. And what we wanted to do was create a measure that had no economic indicators in there. I believe that Mahbub al-Haq already thought about that when he created the Human Development Index, but felt he couldn't get it through the bureaucracy if he took GDP out. So essentially what we've done is we've fulfilled Mahbub al-Haq's vision and created a holistic measure of social progress independent of economic indicators. And then critically, what we do is we base this entirely on secondary data. So for each of these 12 components, we go out and we find high quality, comparable data, 3 to 5 indicators per component to measure each of these underlying concepts. That's what we do, and that's how we apply the index. Now, we started this work before the SDGs were launched, but obviously we were tracking it as it developed. And we were very conscious to make sure there was an alignment. And here just illustrates how we see the Social Progress Index maps against the SDGs. So Social Progress Index is very much conceptually aligned with the SDGs. And I have to say, I love the SDGs. I think it's amazing that we have this global consensus around the kind of world we're trying to build, the kind of societies we're trying to build. But as a friend of the SDGs, I am allowed to be critical. I mean, only the United Nations would try and inspire the world with a number of goals that's a prime number higher than 10 and has a number of targets that's the square of 13. So the SDGs are very hard to communicate. Secondly, the SDGs are a political compromise. So the conceptual basis, it's a very messy conceptual framework across the 17 SDGs. And then, of course, you've got the problem that so much of the data is missing, both in terms of the data not existing, but also concepts within the SDGs for which there are no indicators because they were politically impossible. So I think we have to recognize the SDGs as a political vision are fantastic. The SDGs as a practical tool are hugely problematic. And we're seeing that as people try and implement the SDGs. So what we feel with the Social Progress Index is we can provide a practical way of measuring progress against the SDGs, cutting through all those complexities with the SDGs. And also, because it's built to be a composite index, is a way of aggregating progress into a single point, which is very hard to do with the SDGs at the moment. And I think one of the big risks with the SDGs is that we end up with people just picking 1 or 2 SDGs they care about, and we'll end up with SDG a la carte. So what Social Progress Index can do is help us track progress against the SDGs as a whole. I can't show you a huge amount of what we've done in the time available, but let me just show you, first of all, what we can do, because we have no GDP in the model, is we can look at social progress against GDP per capita. And I think the important finding here is that economic growth is a driver of social progress. It's very important for social progress. Countries with higher GDP per capita tend to have higher social progress. But it is not the whole story. At any level of GDP per capita, there are countries doing better at turning their wealth into social progress than others. GDP is not destiny. We have to move beyond GDP to think about economic and social progress together. And that's demonstrated very clearly by this data. We need countries to be more like Norway or New Zealand or Costa Rica than the United States or Qatar or Equatorial Guinea. We need different models and more inclusive development if we're going to get anywhere near the SDGs. How close are we? Well, we measure 163 countries, so we've got most of the world's population, and we've got time series data. And what we can see for the SDGs is that, maybe the good news is that there is progress happening, but the progress is nowhere near fast enough to achieve the SDGs. We think, this is our calculations from last year, is we think 2082 is the current date by which we would hit the SDGs on the current trend. And I think if COVID has a negative impact, we think it could set us back by another 10 years. So the SDGs are woefully off track, and we can demonstrate that with this data. So what we also do with the Social Progress Index is take it down to a local level to drive action, because we didn't want to create something that was just interesting. We wanted to create something that was actionable. So we've worked through a network of partners around the world to take this index and drive it towards action. And let me just give you a few examples of how that's done. One is in the European Union. The European Commission has adopted the Social Progress Index, has made it an instrument of EU's cohesion policy to help think about regional development in a much more coherent way and think about the targeting and use of regional development resources. We've also done work in India. We've built a Social Progress Index for the states and also districts of India that's being used by the Indian government to help drive their agenda around poverty reduction in India. We've done similarly work in Mexico, looking at the progress of Mexican states. We've also done work in South Africa, where we've looked at the different performance of different provinces in South Africa. What we've also done in South Africa is we've broken it down demographically, looking not just at the average performance, but also looking at different demographic groups, particularly young people. And we had a very striking finding in South Africa that although over the last 10 years, South Africa's social progress has moved forward, For young people, it's actually gone backwards. And so it's very important that we disaggregate for different groups to understand the differential impacts. And then finally, what we also do is we break down to hyperlocal levels. So this is just one example of how we've used the Social Progress Index at the city level. This is the city of San Jose, California, sitting right next to Silicon Valley, absolutely astronomical levels of median household income, but also extraordinary pockets of deprivation. And so what we've done is we've worked with the mayor of San Jose to build, this is a mapping of social progress down to the level of individual census tracts that's then being applied into the budgetary process to help with budget planning, policy interventions, etc. So this is how the Social Progress Index tool can be applied from the global level all the way down to the local level as a practical tool to help drive decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you a lot for this very interesting approach and how you move from the global to the local levels using this kind of tool. Now I have the honor to introduce Priya Sood. I hope she's there to present the Global Alliance for Reporting Progress on Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies. That means the SDG 16 plus. Priya, if you are there, please go on. The floor is.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the delay. Early morning linking in through Zoom from New York City and a little bit of childcare issues, but I am here. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to present. I will first share my presentation. Just give me a moment. Hold on. It's not working for some reason. Here it is. Sorry. Can you see it all?
Yes, very well.
As Edgardo said, I am representing the Global Alliance for Reporting Progress on Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies. A very ambitious title, but it basically speaks to how a multi-sectoral group can work on monitoring and reporting of SDG 16. I'll talk briefly about what it is and then explain to you why we focus on reporting and why SDG 16, very much connected to Michael's conversation on the SDGs and how they are challenging and how we can make them more of a reality in practice. So the Global Alliance right now consists of member states, civil society, private sector, and UN entities, 7 of them, currently hosted by UNDP, to really focus on strengthening evidence-based reporting, monitoring, and measurement of SDG 16. Why reporting? How does it add value? As Michael said, the SDGs can be seen as a very useful political tool, but member states did sign on to the 2030 agenda and are very much increasing the momentum on submitting their voluntary national reviews and at the high-level political forum. And by focusing on reporting, this builds action, first of all. Once you get a sense of where you are, you're getting a status update of where your gaps are, where the challenges are, where the opportunities are. It helps you drive action. It also increases accountability. So citizens see where their views are expressed and where the government is sometimes failing them and what needs to be done so they can advocate for their needs and their requirements. It's also a very useful tool, very multi-dimensional tool to bring different actors together and stakeholders, which is what we are trying to do with the Alliance. Why SDG 16? This is another way to show SDG 16 is a relatively new goal. It's very politically sensitive, so it's a challenging goal, but member states, and it was quite controversial when when it was presented to member states, but it did make it through. And so it's something that we feel here through the UN and through the eyes of these multi-stakeholder groups that without it, you can't achieve poverty alleviation. You can't achieve gender equality. It's an enabling goal. It connects to several of the other goals that are necessary to measure the multiple dimensions of poverty and inequality. So as I mentioned, and I think probably many of you on this call know about the High-Level Political Forum and the Voluntary National Reviews. Member states committed to submitting national reviews annually, and that number has actually doubled since 2015. So there is an increasing interest and momentum in the importance and value of voluntary national reviews. They have also member states have improved their reporting on it and have also engaged in a lot of peer-to-peer learning when they come here to New York City. We feel that one of the ways, voluntary national review in itself is a useful process, and coming to New York and presenting is a useful process, but that it needs to go one step further. And member states are being encouraged now through us to really talk about how they feed in their recommendations and gaps in the voluntary national reviews to national actions and priorities and plans, specifically with a leave no one behind approach. So we recently launched this mainstreaming SDG 16 resource using the voluntary national review to advance more peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the section on localization. Some of the challenges that are presented when reporting on SDG 16 is that it's not as inclusive as member states say they are being inclusive. So really, how do member states oftentimes speak to the usual suspects, sit in capital, and cannot or are not able to or do not want to consult with those outside of their periphery and their immediate circles? One of the ways that we're encouraging an approach to really highlight the Leave No One Behind agenda and to create more meaningful inclusion, because that's very much entrenched in goal 16, peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, is to figure out ways to include those that are out of reach. So Indigenous communities, people with disabilities, persons of concern, the list is endless, women and youth. I can go on and on, but really, first of all, recognizing what are some of the key challenges to effectively localizing SDG 16. So first reporting on it, but then really trying to get the work done in more key areas outside of the main ones. And also how to build more awareness about this process. And once you're involving inclusive communities throughout the country, how to keep them engaged even after the VNR process is done. So the VNR is this entry point where you can build some inclusivity, you can build partnerships and consult with them. And once that community of people and organizations are built, it can continue as you go through the work. I also have a bullet here on CSO engagement. A lot of countries have reported that they do consult with CSOs, which is great, through consultations, through dialogues and partnerships. There's also an opportunity that CSOs themselves do spotlight shadow reports. And it's not to be seen as a controversial tool, but complementary to what the member state voluntary national review. In a way, sometimes member states do not have the capacity to consult so many. And so civil societies can bring a different lens because they're working in very specific niche, smaller communities throughout the country, that they can bring that voice to member states' attention through these civil society shadow reports. So it's another way that organizations and citizens can get involved. Sorry. I'll talk a little bit about challenges. As speakers have been saying, it's very challenging to report on the SDGs, even more so with SDG 16, because it's a very nuanced goal. It's new and it's very politically sensitive. So there are ways of looking at how data partnerships can be built through the VNR process. Again, connecting national statistics systems with youth organizations, with civil society, with local and regional governments, with international organizations as well, but also that the recognition that SDG 16 and several of the others lack data disaggregation. So there's oftentimes very little data disaggregation on gender, on youth, on many of the communities I spoke about, persons of disabilities, and there are opportunities to see how you can work again with other organizations on the ground to build that data, to create it, to collect it through household surveys, and to bring it a little bit more in focus.
Thank you, Priya. You need to conclude, please.
Yes, I will. There's just a few examples. I wanted to say that in Guatemala, they are aligning local development plans with the national development priorities. In Oaxaca and New York City, the last point is that they have done voluntary local reviews. So in the US, they have never done a voluntary national review, but New York City, in fact, has done a local review. Thank you. I will leave my remarks there, and there's resources that can be found as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the three first speakers. As I promised, now we would like to give the floor to the participants to address questions to the first speakers regarding the HDI Planet Adjusted, regarding the social progress indicator, and the measurement on how to monitor SDG 16, that is one of the more complex indicators of the SDGs goals. Then the floor is open. I don't know if there is anyone that you can hide your hands or ask or send a chat. If there is not any question, I will have the privilege maybe to address some question to the different speakers. But first, try to give the floor to the participant. Who is the first that want to speak? Please, the floor is open for the participants. The Sylvia Gilbert, if you can help me if you see any hand or any demand. I cannot see all the participants.
You mean questions, Edgardo?
Exactly.
No.
Questions.
Yeah, not for the moment. There are not questions, but we can continue and
no, I will.
Okay.
I will use my privilege to ask some of you what are your, let's see, maybe trying to follow the order of speaking. As you know, we are closing one of the big crises of the world after the Second War, and one of the questions that all of us are trying to address now is how this crisis, how we can conciliate the need for economic recovery that hit very hard our societies with the environmental transition to avoid going back to business as usual. That's the HDI Adjusted Planet can help us to address this kind of debate in the current situation. Heriberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Edgardo. Yes, something interesting this year, 2021, is expected to be the year with the highest level of GDP per capita, according to the projection. So the world has recovered from the economic point of view. However, we know that we have so many problems. We are going still through a very deep humanitarian crisis in several dimensions. So what we are doing here is very important to try to measure different dimensions of human development, so we are able to bring to the forefront certain aspects that are not captured by GDP per capita, and as the other speakers have said, also to try to bring those measurements to the ground. So I think that's the first step, to really try to capture what matters to people. And second, try to link this to some of the policies going on. So the world now is spending around $15 trillion in plans of recovery. So we need to be able to link those expenditures to actual progress in the lives of people, not only today, but going forward. So we need to demand accountability that those investments are used to create something new and better for the future. So we need to be able to invest in clean energies. We need to be able to promote also the respect of indigenous people, all things that are gonna give us a better chance to create the type of economy and the type of society that we need going forward. So I think I will concentrate on those two things: better measurement and link to policies. Over.
Thank you very much. I have now a question for one of the participants that will address to the to Priya and to Michael. Sorry, you have only, I would say, 30 seconds, 40 seconds to answer the question. Then one of the questions is how to articulate better the production of data and the report and the development of reports for the decision-making process, and particularly for the development of public policies. What are the challenges that these articulations means? I don't know who want to answer, Michael, Priya?
I could.
Please.
Go on.
Okay. It's a challenging question. I can put forward some tools that we are working on with UNDP, OHCHR, and UNODC. One of them is household surveys, which are created for specific targets of Goal 16. I also would invite you to review some of the case studies. I know that the UK has done an online site where they develop where they have put up a platform of the status of the SDGs and encourage organizations to feed into that process through the National Statistics Office. So there are a lot of innovations around data creation. It's also what might be a little bit easier, I say, in the field is data collection. So in this time of COVID-19, when much of the world is in lockdown, what are ways that we can consult and seek data through online opportunities if the digital divide is not there? But I'll leave it there for now. And I can share some tools in the chat as well.
Please, go on, please. Michael, 30 seconds, go on.
Yeah, I mean, data is a problem. I mean, if you want to see a man cry, I'll tell you all the problems we have with data. I mean, housing and shelter has been terribly measured, I think partly because the MDGs left out housing. Quality of life for people living with disability, mental health, a whole bunch of gender data is missing. There's definitely a problem with data. But there's also a lot of data out there. And I think to your point about getting to decision makers, this is where we see SPI is very much not a data initiative, but a grammar initiative. If decision makers struggle with all this data out there, how do I bring it together and give it meaning to help me make decisions? So that's what we're trying to do with SPI by having a composite index that brings together all these different factors into a single measure. It really helps the way to help decision makers see where they are, benchmark, and then make better decisions. So think about it as a data challenge, but there's also a question about how do we make that data useful for decision makers.
Thank you very much, Michael. This was a great presentation and first part of the discussion. We will continue later. Then I move now to the second part of what I call the second round. And we will have on the presentation of Carlos, Claire, and Mario. Carlos. Carlos Cesa is the research director of the Institute, as I mentioned before, the Institute of Studies for Integration of Systems of Rome. But here he will introduce us to the territorial quality of life indicators. Michael, Carlos, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Edgardo, for the invitation. And I just put on the chat the link to a working paper that is describing in more detail, but still synthetic, this research that I'm going now to present to you. I have to say that actually the point made by Heriberto now, and also the question from the audience could be almost a perfect introduction to my presentation now. That was not agreed before, of course. Because actually we had this task of measuring territorial quality of life. And basically, our approach here in Europe, ESPON is a program that is specialized, or from the European Commission, is specialized in territorial research. And was this question, why do we need to measure quality of life at different territorial levels? This is the specificity of our approach. Measuring progress only. There are some very simple statements at the start that make that require a very complex answer. Actually, measuring progress by means of GDP or income indicator is not enough to address all the things that matters in the life of citizens. This is a simple statement. Enhancing quality of life has become a key objective for policymakers at different territorial scales, regional, local, national, along with increasing demand for this participation of citizens into the political process. And so territorial quality of life indicators, in our opinion, can complement economic and social cohesion indicators to measure territorial development, address citizens' quality of life needs and expectations. So this means that our task was actually complementary or linked to the integrated human development perspective that we are discussing now. And also that the kind of approach that I'm going to present briefly in a few minutes is something that we propose as an approach to be considered for including the quality of life dimension into any intervention that in Europe we have for the Next Generation EU, for the recovery plan, for considering really the territorial needs more in detail. So our approach was, first of all, asking what does it mean territorial quality of life, what is about. It was a very ingenuity approach. We step back from sustainable development goals, all the many indicators that we have surveyed, including the social progress index, for example, that was presented by Michael, but for trying to again ask this question. For us, first of all, the focus is not so much human development, but if you see to this definition that we adopted that territorial quality of life is for any living being. Life, that's what is life. Life is survival plus flourishing in a supporting environment. So from this definition, we have the task of measuring territorial quality of life means measuring the capabilities needed by all living beings, not only humans, to survive and flourish in a place, based on the economic, social, and ecological conditions that support life in that place. For us, this concept gave the room to represent a conceptual model of territorial quality of life encompassing, which I'm going to present with this map. But basically, this encompasses three spheres: personal sphere, socio-economic sphere, and ecological sphere, which means the nature with lithosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, all the ecological impacts, and three territorial quality of life dimension, First of all, what we have named the good life enablers that are basically those conditions that at territorial level can enable personal housing, so a number of basic needs that are needed, and elements of the socioeconomic sphere and of the ecological sphere, which are related to programs that want to create and offer basic condition for life. And then life is divided into life maintenance and life flourishing. This is a vision of the life process of any living being as a kind of homeostatic dynamic condition in which every living being wants, first of all, to keep their survival conditions. And second, very important for life, is the aspiration to flourish into a life project, I would say. No? And this is something that you can declinate for human beings at the personal level, but you can find as a principle of life also in other levels and for other living beings. This is the approach. And then we have this distinction between indicators measuring basically the health of personal health, social health, inclusive economy, and healthy environment, and indicators looking at conditions for flourishing. So at the personal level, self-esteem, self-actualization. At the community level, community flourishing means the flourishing of a community of trust and community and social goods. And at the ecosystem level means to guarantee the condition for ecological flourishing. So this approach means basically that we want to give as a key messages for a policymaker is that the good life enablers for the people living in the place matter. So this means to improve the quality of housing, health, education, mobility, digital infrastructure and services in all places, and access to work, consumption, social and cultural activities, because people need to have this condition for living and continuing to live, immigrating and not exiting from one place. Then personal flourishing can be measured. This is a second important task because is measuring citizens' health and flourishing by means of objective and thanks also to innovation into data that we have now, big data tools or elements, also subjective indicators. Community flourishing is important as well. A sense of belonging and how trustful citizens are of other people and institutions is a key aspect for living well in a place. So it's a quality of life aspect. Ecological flourishing is key for the quality of our life. We are immersed into the biodiversity. And if the biodiversity suffers for our impacts, we will suffer together with the other living beings. This is the concept. So living in harmony with nature requires the measurement of ecological flourishing by means of new environmental indicators to monitor the health of ecosystems and biodiversity in urban and rural areas, not only into the wild. So based on this concept, we have rapidly, I will show simply that we have developed an Excel tool that is a territorial quality of life dashboard with a number of indicators for all the 22 subdomains that we have identified. The indicators are empirically searched and collected were collected at European level for all the NUTS3 regions in Europe, which is equivalent to the county level. So it's a sub-regional level. Actually, we have a situation in which we have, you can imagine, very poor data to fill this picture. But we made an effort of a kind of a census of the data availability and gaps, because this project was also intended to propose how to continue and develop a method that is applied in the future. Then we have applied this to the picture that I have 1 minute, I guess. And,
no, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. So I go, it has been applied with the composite index at the European level. Just one last thing about, because I think it can indirectly answer the question from the others. It's about how to fill with data this tool, apart from our first experiments. Actually, for having the right granularity, we will need a kind of a wave of innovation in the way we design and collect data for this territorial quality of life measuring purpose. There is room for applied citizen science projects involving the citizens into process with the experts for developing the data needed at local level. And we have also imagined an accounting process based on territorial quality of life living lab, in which we combine stakeholders, citizens, experts of statistical offices for developing this approach connected to policy programs that have an impact on the territorial quality of life. And this is a kind of answer also from the point of view of this approach to the question that was raised by one of the participants. Thank you for...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I keep some of your keywords, how to territorialize, how to develop granular data, how to have a more central people approach for data and analysis collection and the complexity of indicators and gathering data. I move now to Claire Medina, Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in Malawi, that will introduce us to the concept of SDG Hotspots to measure multidimensional aspect of poverty. Please, Claire, you have the ground.
Thanks very much, Edgardo. And I see very well now why you chose the order of the presentations, because I think my presentation follows on very nicely from Carlos. The SDG Hotspots is a tool that we have been applying here in Malawi to measure the multidimensional aspects of poverty and to try and link them to the SDG indicators. In short, basically what we're looking at is an analysis of poverty mapped, which informs community development processing as well as a targeted service response. So basically, it's an approach that's been used in Latin American countries, as I understand it, for quite some time. And we've been in touch with Honduras and Colombia in a very good kind of SAD cooperation approach to learn from how they did it and how we could set up something similar. And I believe it's the first time that this has been applied in Africa, so it's quite a different context and quite different challenges. We've been working on it since 2018 with the Ministry of Local Development and applying it to two districts in the south of Malawi, looking at this multidimensional poverty. So building exactly on what Carlo was saying, right? I mean, poverty traditionally in Malawi was measured through money metrics, looking at how many people lived on less than $1 a day and looking at household consumption. And so, again, as Carlo referred to, that's useful, but it isn't the whole picture. And it doesn't really take into account the dimensions of poverty that we know that the people experience here in Malawi: lack of education, poor health and nutrition, poor housing, and unsafe water. And so the hotspots approach partly addresses this, and it draws on multiple data sets. So, for example, the national census, which was done a couple of years ago here, For example, the Universal Beneficiary Registry, which is basically a system that pulls together all the different recipients of social protection programming, and then the various thematic databases that we can access, basically, and pulls them all together in one unified system. And then that's updated in real time by volunteers on the ground and monitors on the ground, as well as the services that are being provided, not just by the state, because many of the services are provided outside of the state here in Malawi, but we also look at UN agencies and NGOs, for example. So what does that give you? Basically, what you get then is a mapping of different data sets, which can be looked at individually. So, for example, if this is the map of infant mortality in Malawi, but also you can map them onto each other. And that way you can see the multiple overlapping areas of deprivation. And that's in part why we call it the hotspots, because you can see those areas in red, which are really the areas of multiple overlapping deprivation in Malawi and where you might need to target your development programming. And so you can use the data by geography, by indices that you're interested in, and you can really see the map either at the national level, but also down much further to the local level. And actually the data goes down to the individual household level, but obviously to protect the privacy, then it gets aggregated through the quadrants that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen for a minimum of 10 households. To avoid exposing the individual households. And then what you can see at a more individualized village level is the lower screen, where you see the blues and the reds according to the indicator that you're interested in measuring. So in the context of then an emerging crisis, and actually in Malawi, you're very often talking about protracted crises in any case. You can amend the system to get real-time information as well. So, for example, in one of the districts, the tool was amended at the request of the district council and the health workers to get information on COVID prevention awareness measures and coping strategies that different households are using. But also disasters and how people are adapting to drought. And then that's used by the relevant sectors as they're planning appropriate interventions. And that really gets to my next point, because if the system would stop at data, that's interesting in itself, but it isn't the whole point. And to my opinion, the strength of the system lies in responding to the data. And firstly, the data is complemented by an already established and very consultative community action development planning process here in Malawi, where starting at the village level, the villagers talk about the challenges that they're facing and they prioritize those. And essentially what we're doing then is getting the qualitative data that's put alongside the quantitative data in the earlier data sets. And those combined data sources are pulled together at the district level in district action plans, which then set out the prioritized detailed interventions with the budgets. It goes up to the national level with the Ministry of Local Development, and they coordinate with the different ministries such as Education, Health and Agriculture that are also partly decentralized to ensure a standardized coordinated approach. That becomes useful then in a coordinated evidence-based service response where multiple service providers, and again, as I mentioned before, that can be government, it can be NGOs, it can be UN agencies here in Malawi, come together around one multidimensional development challenge and basically bring together a combined package of services in like a kind of campaign style sweep over a particular geographic area. And right now we're at that stage. So we're putting together a campaign targeting food insecurity. and tackling it from the different kind of multi-dimensional approaches with different agencies coming together. So we have solar-powered irrigation systems for consistent crop yields. We have boreholes, farm field schools, nutrient-rich crops. And that links back then to the dashboard to show us, which is on the right-hand side that you can see there, to show us if what we're doing is actually working. And the needle then should shift from red to orange and eventually, hopefully, to green. What you're getting is an evidence-based service delivery, which in itself in Malawi is a challenge, but also a coordinated service delivery that can be measured more or less in real time, and you can adapt as needed what you're doing. And if what you're doing isn't working and it isn't moving the needle, the idea is then that you would shift what you're doing straight away, almost like an inbuilt tracking system to see if what you're doing really moves that needle. I will stop there. That was a whistle-stop tour, but there's obviously many challenges, particularly in this development context, and I'm more than happy to pick up on those in the questions. Thanks, Edgardo.
Thank you, Claire. And I don't know if I don't hear, but you mentioned the multi-stakeholder platforms in Malawi. That is an initiative that we will link it later to the debate, how to go to granular and more involvement of multi-stakeholder approach to gather data. Then I moved forward to Mario. Mario, you are Associated Professor of Development Economic at the University of Florence, but you are also, I understand, Scientific Director of ARCO. Please, you are going to illustrate us also through a territorial approach, the experience of China and the use of what you call harmonious multidimensional indicator. Please go on.
Thank you very much, Edgardo. It's really a pleasure to be with you and with all the others. I am fascinated by the previous speakers. I am, as you said, a scholar from the University of Florence, and I was thinking, what can I say today? But I have a lot of experience, especially with UNDP, with UCLG, with UN Habitat. And the idea is that here we have to transform something. And in doing that, we need to monitor and to analyze data at the territorial level. COVID has generated a phenomenon which is not a pandemic, but a syndemia, as many people have said, where it's clear that the syndemic issue is not global, but the context matter. The context is so relevant, the territory, the local, and the places are so relevant that we sometimes forget, but not here, not at this conference. I have been at this conference at all the forums that were done before. This is the 5th forum. And during my research, I had a territorial experience using official data and then secondary data. And so in having seen what the other were speaking about, especially the previous speaker, I decided to concentrate more on official data, what we can do. And when you use the official data, very often you realize that in relying on secondary data, it's very hard to measure what is in goal 16. And I'm showing that with using the Chinese data. Although it's very important to get territorial data, when we go to participation, we should have more local community perspective, and the voluntary local review that I will speak at the end of the discussion is quite central. We are going back to what it has been called in the past, in the 70s, as an integrated approach to local development, which is now much more with the attention to issues related to poverty, employment, to well-being of people, and all dimensions. So the case I have used is China. China is really at the crossroads, and with a scoreboard and with an aggregated approach level, the harmonious multidimensional index, it is in the title. Well, really, it is very important. But at the same time, while you are doing research, you realize that something is missing. So we were doing research having in mind the sustainable human development pillars: equity, efficiency, participation, and empowerment, and sustainability. Looking at China, there are really no data about participation and empowerment. They are very limited. And so we decided to work on what we had that is based on secondary data. We had as a conceptual fellow the SDGs and the Sustainable Human Development. And so we developed the Harmonious Multidimensional Index. And what I can say, I'm very happy about this index. I'm very happy because it takes into consideration harmonious economic development, harmonious social development. It takes into consideration economic development, but also economic sustainability, social development, but also inclusive society. So there are the indicators, there are the subdimensions that come in, and they can be connected to data you have. I'm going very fast because I want to go to the end of my presentation, but this is give an idea. If you want, you can read what has been done. And then you can link those subdimensions with SDGs, and you go on and you realize that at the end of the story, although very interesting, environmental issues are there, health issues, access is there, different type of measurement is there, equality is there, household stability is there as well, because we shouldn't think just about what is the situation, but also the stability. Then we have used the data set from different provinces, official data for different type of source, mainly the statistical yearbook, but other too, like the China Labor Statistical Yearbook and the China Compendium Statistics. So all are secondary data. Then we have used an innovative way of measuring that takes into account the aggregate level, it takes into account the different outcomes, because it's not just a question of having the outcome, but it's also having, and then we came with the results showing that economic development, you can see in the top, has been increased, but economic sustainability, well, not so well in different areas. It means that we should go in detail. Very often we look at China as a single country. It is a single country, but within there are many differences. And you can take the difference at the provincial level, but you cannot go very far. So China has launched you have to go much more in deeper and try to localize, and this has been done, not by ourselves, but by other people. You realize that China is so different. And then if you go and look at the SDGs, you would see how different they are and how they are different according to the different area of the country. And within each of the province, I would say that you can find similar differences, okay? So it is clear that something is so relevant, the localization of the SDGs, the localization of the agenda, and the need to go a bit further, because the SDGs do not cover everything. From a capability approach perspective and a human development perspective, you can go much more in detail about what we like very much, which is participation and other issues that are very often left aside. So what has been done in China is to try to create these hubs, try to make these measure. And it's quite interesting to see how things are going. But still there are missing dimensions. And this missing dimension, which I found in secondary data, and which somehow dictate us as experts in what we can do. There are little data about participation, especially in some countries. There is a little data about strong institution, about peace. We have some proxy, but they are not good. And about social relations, which are at the core of our development process and are part of the idea of participation and empowerment, which is one of the pillars of sustainable human development. So what is missing is really goal 16 and maybe also 17. Then we have tool. So I'm not advertising this tool, but I think it's quite important, and I have been using it in Italy, in Florence, and in Florence municipality. So the voluntary local reviews, and UCLG and UN Habitat as well before UNDP Art are all very much interested in this idea, because it's there where you can bring in participation. And participation is quite central in this process, in this transformation. As I wrote before in one of the previous slides, the transformation can go only through agency and a participatory process, which means at the end empowerment. So what we are doing now is we are working on participatory process, and we are looking at the Agenda 2030 In Florence, by adapting the idea, Florence municipality are 41. One of them is Florence, so is the metropolitan city of Florence. And we could do there participatory methods. We could involve people and the civil society in what is relevant. Because you can talk in general about sustainable development goals, the agenda and sustainable human development at the national level. But if you want really to make people part of the process, you have to go at the local level. So I'm finishing just giving you some remarks. So it's quite interesting to have a multidimensional analysis, which already is going to say something very important. In the case of China, it's clear that if you have some areas of China that are developing faster in terms of GDP growth, it is not in terms of environmental sustainability, is not the case for social inclusion. And so you understand that we need really a multidimensional analysis. Now we are so confident in ourselves, all the speakers, but it was not like that many years ago, like 10, 20 years ago, especially for economists. Now the economists are finally opening their eyes and understand that it's not just the economy. Otherwise, you're just creating a society that is not sustainable environmentally, socially, but then also economically, because if it is not sustainable economically, environmentally and socially, it will not be for sure in the long term from the point of view of social relation and so about economy. Then the availability of data are very important. And to have data at the local level are so important. The speaker before me is showing how you can then try to map and understand fully how the deprivation do not allow people to flourish, what services are needed, how we can rethink our way of producing something in order to reduce pollution or let's say social exclusion. And then other things are very important. Without this analysis at the local level, it's hard to say policy implication. What can I say about the research I published about China? A few things. I should say, look, you should not look just in the coastal area about economic growth. You should take into consideration environmental issues and social inclusion, which is central and which already is done by the Chinese government. We have to go much deeper, and people need to be part of the process, to be agent of change and empower themselves. So it's okay, the research, it's okay, the aggregate level, but the scoreboard approach reveals much more. There are limitations, and these limitations are clear. We need more participation and social relation in our research. So thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you a lot for all of you, for all the three. This session brings us to the discussion of what I call the territorial approach, how to embed the discussion on data, on index, on citizens or multi-stakeholders involvement. Then the ground is open for questions and answers. We still have 9 minutes. Then an interesting debate was going on between Cesar and other participants, Carlos, sorry, and other participants regarding, in particular, how to localize, how to go beyond new three, that means counties or departments, to go to more the municipal or the more local level. Then ground is open. I don't know if you have any of the participants that are still there want to have any question. If not, maybe I will ask some questions on the different speakers. Silvia or Giuliano, do you see any hand or any other question that can be put forward? Please, the participant, you can open your micro and ask to the speakers if you want. If not, I will move to the different participants. I have a question, Carlos, for you, as in the same way that I have the previous question to Heriberto. See, the question of the crisis, and particularly in Europe, the question of the recovery plan, the next European generation, how your territorial quality life can be useful if you need to discuss with the Commission, with the national government, with the local government, different stakeholders, this how to use this strategically this investment in the coming months, years. Carlos, please, if you 1 minute, no more to answer.
Yes. No, I think that basically it could be a kind of help for facilitating a cultural change, in this sense that even the recovery plan, all our investments are leading to creating conditions for local productivity, and then thanks to reducing disparities in local productivity as an indirect effect to have an impact on the life of the citizens there. I think that basically you should address directly some conditions of life that are not directly necessarily related to the income level, and to address directly the multiple dimension of inequality that you have also mentioned in the question of this workshop. And the territorial quality of life tool and approach and method could help to identify these domains where the condition of life do not directly depend from the fact that you have an high or low income, but from the fact that the territorial level, some basic conditions are ensured for all people living there, which is the concept, if you want, of the commons, of the public goods, that should be valued also directly in this investment, because they will then create really the condition for people to flourish, even in the economic sector. So this is my answer. Focalize on these domains.
I have a question for one of the participants, Ana de Miguel, regarding how to communicate, to disseminate the data with the citizens, with the communities, to generate greater citizen ownership of the 2030 agenda. Who want to answer? Claire, Mario, or if not Carlos? Go on, please.
I'm happy to start, and then the others can come in if they want to. No, thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and that's one of the things that we've been really mindful of as we're establishing the system. You know, it's really important that you consult people on what it is that you're going to do, but it's really important that you give feedback on what you're doing and what the results are of what you're doing. So one of the processes behind the SDG hotspots is not only to have this dashboard so that policymakers can see what's going on, but also to have it disaggregated at the local level so the villagers can see what's going on. Firstly, what's being implemented, but whether or not the indicators are making sense and are changing. So the volunteers have, in order to be able to update the system in real time as they're going around, they have like a mini tablet. And with the mini tablet, they also have a visual representation of the village and the data in the village, and what's happening in the village and whether something is changing, in order to be able to facilitate that conversation and the buy-in. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mario, do you want to add anything?
I think what Claire said is very central. It is important to have these, let's say, two-pronged action. On the one side, you need to have data and collect data and maybe use new way of collecting data. At the same time, these data have no sense, well, have sense, but not enough if we don't, we are not able to work with and consult, but not just consult, to be the citizen part of the process. So yeah, I think it's very important to combine these two elements, and who wants to do this type of activities need really to work at the local level. And the more data are needed from the source, as Carlos Cesar was saying, We need more data at our official data. I mean, no, there is a cost in having data, and there is a tremendous need. At the same time, a lot of energy and resources are and need to be in the participation and in the citizenship, in creating really a responsibility, in creating a resilient society. This is what we are doing in the municipality of Florence. So is this metropolitan city of Florence, by involving different people from the different municipalities, and especially young people. And this is very important because it changes also the narratives. So probably the work in Malawi is going to change the narratives. People understand more the territory, and they can do something, and they can influence the type of services that they are receiving, and they will be more responsible as well.
Thank you very much. If there is not any answer, we are coming to the end of this session. Let me try, I don't know, to wrap up. It's very difficult to wrap up all this, all the debate, but at least to add some reflection from my side. All of you, all the presentations show that there is a global shared concern about the multidimensional dimensions to measure human development and its impact on the planet, sustainable development, poverty, quality of life, social progress, governance. All the debates show that, particularly around the SDG indicators, that management of RSN and data are essential to monitor commitments, ensure regular assessments, and also follow up progress. But the objective and principles of all these methodologies, from my point of view, should be clear and shared. They must contribute to enhance the partnership at all levels, to be accessible for all, and support a human-centered approach. Obviously, I am talking from my perspective. This is a global network of local authorities, of local government, and for us, this is a critical debate. The world is still far from the goals and targets adopted in 2015. But we need to involve, as you mentioned, local institutions and stakeholders in the production of localized and disaggregated data. It is almost impossible to enhance development planning at local, but also at national and even at global levels, without adequate information and data that contribute to embed decision-making process in the reality of our people, of our territory, to ensure regular monitoring and assessment. And without developing a stronger national system of data that integrate local data gathering and strengthen local capacities to contribute to it, this will be almost impossible. The global community committed in 2015 to transform the world and to promote a data revolution. All your contributions today, all your initiatives certainly contribute to this aim, but we need to join forces and to continue to work together. Thank you very much. I think we finish this workshop. I don't know if we have a few seconds of a minute more. I would like to congratulate all of you and to thank you for your participation, as well as the organizers of this 5th Forum of Local Economic Development. And I think it is only the beginning of the discussion. We will continue with us in the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much. Thank you, Silvia and Giuliano, all of you for your contribution. Thank you also for the first speakers, for Carlos, for Claire, for Heriberto, Michael, and Priyat for your contributions. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much and congratulations. Bye-bye.